And let this be an election manifesto that when we, not if, when we come to power, when we march into Putrajaya, this is what we are going to do. And I'm prepared even to participate, not necessarily the head, but to be part of the ombudsman, where we will go around 6 months after we formed the federal government and do what they did in Iran soon after the 1979 revolution. Line up 10,000 corrupt people and shoot them. And that's why I love Iran. They got rid of corruption by getting rid of the corrupt people. And I suppose the Great Fire of London proved that the only way to get rid of the plague is to burn the rats. So they have to burn the rats.
I think people wishes to say a word.
No prize for guessing this or for giving me your answer. What is Malaysia's favorite animal?
Tiger, probably.
Oh, no. It's a white elephant. Now, corruption in Malaysia is not something to laugh about. It is extremely serious. Now, many people have been asking this question. I've been involved in the anti-corruption movement for years. What can we do? And people say, what can we do to eradicate corruption? The answer, you cannot eradicate corruption. All you can ever hope to do is to lessen the incidence of corruption. But, you know, having said that, it does not mean that if we really have the political will, and the next government of Malaysia will have that will, we will have to change. It's not something that can happen overnight, but a start has to be made. And the starting point, as far as we are concerned, is to change all the systems and processes of governance that have enabled civil servants and ministers and others to be corrupt. Now, if you make sure that the whole system is overhauled, not all at once, but you know, you identify priorities so that people cannot exploit the weaknesses which are evident in the present day system. So don't lose heart. Vote with your head and not with your heart, because you know we don't want the whole thing to become an emotional thing. You vote for us because you believe that we can be trusted to govern and govern well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now take questions from this wing of the lecture hall, and if I can ask both questions and answers to be kept as short as possible, please. From this wing. I'll take you, sir, and you, sir, just because you're the only three I've got. Yes.
A number of tragic cases which has resulted in some cases of breakup of families, particularly with regard to religious conversion. The Sharia courts in some cases declared that a Muslim is a Muslim forever and can never change his or her faith. Now, this is clearly in conflict with the Constitution, which guarantees freedom of worship. How does Pakatan Rakyat plan to resolve this conflict when it comes to power?
The Sharia court.
Your question on the freedom of Muslims to convert to other religion. Now, I think this is very important in our society because, you know, people are now beginning to assert their rights, and they feel, why should we be forced by the Constitution to do things that are not what we want to do? Now, could I ask Dato' Sri Anwar, as our future Prime Minister, if the party that he will be leading, which will have the two-thirds, the magical two-thirds majority, be prepared to have a look at the Constitution, see whether this constitutional provision prohibiting Muslims from changing their religion be removed?
Let me say this. My immediate answer would be, please give us enough support to get to the majority. But serious, on a more serious note, I would say this. We have to relook at the entire constitution. The constitutional guarantees will be protected. You ask me, what's the position on the national language, as is Bahasa? What is the position of the English? Chinese language. It will have to be promoted. There must be freedom, complete freedom, not only to allow, but to encourage. Islam is the religion of the federation. It must be protected. But what the problem, people don't object to the provision of Islam, the religion of the federation. They are annoyed or opposed to the fact that this is used to disallow or create encumbrances to the promotion of other religions. That has got to be clearly defined in the Constitution. But more important, related to what Quazis has said, is the constitutional guarantees. What are our constitutional guarantees? Freedom of conscience or belief, freedom of expression, rule of law, protection or sanctity of life and property, which means security, and dignity of women and men. Now, if you ask me, this is clearly what I understand as a Muslim, the maqasid of the Sharia, which is the higher objectives of the Sharia. What is the higher objective of the Sharia? Freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, sanctity of life and property, and dignity of women and men. Anything that runs contrary to that is to me against the maqasid of the Sharia, and certainly in our context in Malaysia, against the spirit and letter of the Constitution. The Constitution started off as something very idealistic and principled, but it's been adulterated or prostituted in the process to become so weak now. So in that context, I would say we will have to have an elaborate exercise. But the concern is this, which is mainly among Muslims and Muslim organizations. We don't want to be seen or perceived. Every time we move, we only move against. We seem to be against the Muslims and just to appease the demand of the non-Muslims. So we must move purely to protect the spirit and the letter of the Constitution. And to my mind, on the issue of apostasy, I've mentioned my view, backed by scholar Sheikh Taha, and I'm prepared to defend that, which means the Pakatan Rakyat will naturally have to deliberate on this and look and fine-tune and propose amendment to the Constitution if and when necessary.
So, you sir, second, yeah, and you sir back, third. Number one, please.
Dr. Mahathir, in his latest Shirdak column, says that perhaps 20 or 30 years of the NEP is insufficient and it should be extended for, he does not say how long. Has the issue of the NEP become so entrenched in the Malay mindset that it would become difficult to relinquish it? And I believe that Pakatan Rakyat governments in various states have made changes. I'd like to know how and what you would do if and when you come to power. I would also like to raise the concern of my very vociferous friend there about concerns about if the government wins, if Pakatan wins power, that there will be jubilation and it would lead to a May 13th issue. I sincerely appreciate the concern, particularly after what PRK or RPK has said. And you can already see a backlash happening within Barisan, I think, this heightening of ethnocentric issues. Do you think if you win that, given the level of corruption, given that people are claiming that the country is now virtually becoming a failed state, and being compared to Zimbabwe and Burma, and even the Philippines gets more FDIs than Malaysia used to. Do you think that those who control the levers of power would actually allow you to take power?
Second question.
So it is widely accepted that Malaysia is experiencing a brain drain. They are very talented, well-educated, articulate young Malaysians going to Singapore, staying back here, going to Australia. What steps are you going to take that will not only discourage or slow down, but send a message to well-educated young people to say that there is a role for you to play in the world? Thank you.
And third question.
Yeah, every other word you mentioned by you or anybody from Pakatan is equality, fairness, and is justice. But the practice on the ground, especially the states being ruled by Pakatan, seems to be the other way around. I've been raising this issue with all these Pakatan representatives who came over. In Selangor, for example, 800 hectares of land being given to Burma streets or Malays. Fine, good, fairness. Chinese land, house, Chinese schools, land being given. When I raised the issue why Indian schools are not given, the representative said, oh, it's in a private land, we can't do anything. You can find land for these schools, whereas for Indians, you can't find any. Same thing, isn't there Indian schools in Selangor? Why is that divide and rule or selective approach in your implementation of your policies? What we got being grasped in Penang, for example. When Pakatan comes to power, are they going to do the same thing like what Anwar has been doing for 50 odd years? Or are you going to say, right, no more race, whatever issue happens, immaterial of race or religion, be free, all the races, we will go and sort it out. Rather than sending this Indian guy, who's supposed to be representative, toothless guys, says nothing, and then Wayang Kulit. Yeah, we done something.
I will have to take the floor, and I have to leave. I have an engagement before, but Petra and Tian Chua will continue. Now, first the issue in NEP. The NEP in 2007, I crafted the Malaysian economic agenda. At that time, for months, the UMNO media condemned as the anti. This was prior to the elections. Even some of my Malay friends then cautioned me, say, do you think you'll be too radical, too fast? But I think this is an issue the Malays need to appreciate. The non-Malays do need to appreciate. You want us to take some radical measures, and you assume that these things are easy. It's not. We will have to address it. Now, have we been quite successful? Yes. Because even with this program, we won in 2008 in many Malay majority cities. Not only passed, but also keadilan. The major campaign issue in Permatang Pau, in Gombak, in Ampang was against us because they say these guys cannot be trusted because they are used by the non-Malays by attempting to dismantle the economic policy. But to my mind, it's important. But how do you deal with it? Some non-Malays, when they talk about dismantling, they only talk about dismantling the tender process, dismantling the development policy insofar as there is no tender, okay, or awards by the government. But nothing is said about affirmative action to the poor and the marginalized. Now our approach is, you have to propel the economy has to grow. But equity is important. Principle of distributive justice, and if you were familiar with John Rawls, distributive justice is also part and some fundamental aspect of opportunities and freedom. Which means, where do we differ? We differ because UMNO will take it purely as a racial argument, as Mahathir said.